So we are at a crucial time in the history of our planet. There is no denying that we are bombarded by headlines that paint kind of a bleak picture for the future of our planet and for wildlife. But I'm not here today to talk about statistics or science of these headlines. I'm here to talk about how we communicate about the issues that surround these headlines and what we can do better to engage the masses and cultivate a culture of change. So we're not playing a long game anymore. We need to instill a sense of urgency. And yet, when we talk about these issues, a lot of it can fall flat. The whole doomsday approach, the earth is on fire, sixth mass extinction. These are true potentially, but also can be very alienating to people. People can feel hopeless, they can feel overwhelmed, and this can lead to apathy and indifference. So we really need to do better. Humans are highly emotional. It turns out we have our decision-making processes are around 70 to 95% based on emotional factors. And yet, we tend to use rational arguments to help people understand these issues. So instead, we need to find a way to communicate that engages people and fosters a connection for them to have to the issues, and hopefully eventually inspires them to take action. Art is where this is where art comes in, and art has the real power to transform, inspire, educate, and motivate people to move in a direction that could be transformative. To highlight this, I thought it would be fun to give you a couple different examples of a traditional way that we communicate versus the way an artist might. The Borneo orangutan is the largest arboreal mammal. They spend about 90% of their time in the treetops. And yet, over the last 20 years, we have seen an 80% decline in their habitat due to conflict palm oil and timber harvesting. And we also know, due to this, we have seen a 50% decline in their population over the last 60 years. These are the facts. This is science. This is how we normally communicate. And as scientists, a lot of people can understand this, but as a mass population person, this can fall flat. So how does an artist potentially talk about the issues? In Ophelia Redpath's Sorry, she depicts a human and how they might feel about the fact that there is total devastation to this bewildered, beautiful creature. And yet, on the other side, she depicts the orangutan who, although they've lost their home, and although they really are endangered because of human actions, is incapable of blame. Her ability to convey the same message in a visual piece can be really highly provocative, and it draws a person in, engages them, and potentially gets them to want to learn more about the situation. And so the way she has structured this may or may not be appealing to you, but you cannot deny the fact that it's really thought-provoking. It might make you feel sad, it might make you feel angry, and it might even make you want to learn more about the situation. But even what's more, somebody who sees this and really gets to understand the problem might be inspired to change or take an action. Maybe they want to donate to orangutan conservation. Maybe they want to donate to reforestation. Or maybe they look at products to see if there's the palm oil ingredient that they don't want in their products anymore. I want to highlight another example, polar bears and sea ice. As we know, polar bears are highly reliant on sea ice for survival. They use it for protective cover, and they use it to hunt. And yet, as the sea ice melts and they have less of it, they have to rely on their fat stores for longer periods of time to survive because they are unable to hunt. And the longer they have to rely on them, the higher the probability they may starve. Yet we do know over the last 30 years that 95% of the oldest and thickest sea ice has vanished. And unfortunately, we know that when it comes to the Northeast Alaskan and Northwest Canadian Territory subspecies of polar bear, there has been a 40% decline in that population as a result in just a 10-year span. Again, facts, data, and science. So I am really passionate about marine conservation, and so I took a stab at this myself, and I'd like to share with you what I came up with. So this is kind of a sketch and in preliminary form, but I wanted to really highlight how the disintegration of sea ice really means a disintegration of the polar bear species. And again, with the music, potentially, it may have evoked some emotion, an emotional response in you, and hopefully, again, potentially could make somebody want to take action. So why is art so transformative? I want to just clarify that when I speak about art, I'm not just speaking about painting, but I'm also speaking about things that include sculpture, multimedia, film, and any other sort of creative outlet that expresses something. But the power of art really starts with how it is able to evoke an emotional response. Our senses are highly connected to our emotions. When we take in the world through our senses, it tells our brain how to feel. And so because of that, that emotional response is a really key factor. Also, we experience art in our own way, and that gives us the ability to be authentic in our response, take the time to sit back and contemplate what we're experiencing. Also, it's deeply personal. How I experience artwork is very different than how somebody else here might experience art. And so we become very deeply connected to the issue in our own way. It's also, it has a strong power without any words to send a message to anybody around the world. So it transcends barriers of culture, of language, of socioeconomic status, religion, and even generations. And as a result, it doesn't matter who you are, but art can speak to you in the same way it might speak to somebody else. Also, when we think about wildlife, a lot of it is in places we will never go. So I can't see a polar bear today, and I may never, unfortunately, see a polar bear in my life. But art has the power to bring the inaccessible to us. So wild places and wild species become much more accessible through art. Also, because there's no verbal reliance on what we're seeing, we are able to come and be engaged with art and have a more open mind. While words can inflame and can potentially create a defensive response, art tends to engage and draw people in. And finally, it transcends time and space. When you experience art or music today, you're going to have that experience stay with you forever. So it allows you to have an emotional response for as long as time for your life that you're around. And so all of these things really help ignite change and ignite action. So the next thing I really wanted to discuss was or provide some examples of how people in art are actually using their art to make change and drive impact. And there are a lot of different examples out there, but I've chosen 5 that are just very different from each other, and I think provide great examples for what we're discussing. David Shepard was a wildlife artist for decades. He was very successful, and he spent a lot of time in Africa documenting and painting different species of wildlife. In 1984, he started David Shepard Wildlife Foundation because he really wanted to be able to connect his own conservation efforts with those conservationists doing great work to help with wildlife survival. And although the organization was originally started mostly on the sales of his own work, in 2008, they started something called Wildlife Artist of the Year. And this engages artists all around the world to create art for wildlife conservation. Last year, they had over 1,400 entries from 760 artists from over 60 different countries. And I wanted to just provide a quick video, introduce a video to you so that you could learn a little bit more about what they do.
Obviously, as an organization, wildlife is the heart of what we do, but we also were established and set up because of art.
DSWF operate in some of the toughest, harshest climates in conservation, and for art to be their language is truly amazing. Currently speaking, there are Global Canvas, Wildlife Artist of the Year, and the Ambassadors programs. So whether you're professional, an amateur, a child at school, sharing ideas and stories with your peers, there is a space for you at DSWF to share those stories and to create your art and your vision. I think it is an artist's duty to work tirelessly to bring nature's story to the forefront again and share those stories with one another.
That's just a snippet of what they do, and I'm gonna kind of have a little bit of a reel here that shows you some of the art that comes through this competition. But since its inception in 2008, they have been able to raise over 2 million sterling pounds towards wildlife conservation just through these art sales. And that has gone to tremendous work in conservation. And what's so compelling about art sales is that anyone who purchases this art really it's a personal connection, obviously, but they find it emotionally triggering, it's beautiful, and they can take it away for years to come and enjoy it. But moreover, they know that their purchase is making an impact. So it's a win-win situation where it's a feel-good, they get to have something to cherish, and they have then also been able to somehow make an impact for wildlife conservation. And the finalists that are selected from these competitions, their work is then put onto into an exhibition on the Mall Galleries in London. And what's really powerful about these exhibitions is that not only does it resonate with somebody like you and me who are already interested in wildlife and conservation, but it also starts dialogues with people who might never have been an environmentalist or wildlife conservationist. And so people come in, they talk to the artists who've created the artwork, they're able to engage them about the issues that they've created about, and the people then walk away with a little more information, a little more insight, potentially wanting more, and maybe a little change. And this really has transformative power because you're now opening minds to people who might not have already been interested in this subject. But let's talk a little bit more about their specific impact. They have a three-pronged approach where they fight wildlife crime. They also protect, obviously, endangered species, and they engage communities. And so they've been able to reduce poaching and increase surveillance of endangered species throughout Asia and Africa. They've increased patrol and law enforcement in areas where bushmeat trade and poaching and animal trafficking occur, and have been able to arrest 31 different significant traffickers in over 4 countries. They've also are big on instilling values into the next generation, where they've designed programs and built facilities to educate children about the importance of conservation. And lastly, they've also diminished wildlife-human conflict, where they have been able to gain trust of communities in Africa and India to then help them diminish human-wildlife conflict through conservation efforts. The next example I want to talk about is SeaLegacy. SeaLegacy was started by two award-winning conservation photographers, Paul Nicklin and Christina Mittermeier, and Andy Mann, who is an Emmy-nominated director and marine conservationist. And their mission is really to engage the world and have them fall in love with the ocean through highly hopeful, if you will, visual storytelling. And I'd love for you to go on, write this down, sealegacy.org, go onto their website and explore more, and go on their YouTube channel, because they have tremendous documentaries and footage about all the species that they're working to protect and the work that they do and the exhibitions that they take. But I do want to show a quick trailer of sort of a summary of what they do, because I do think it's quite compelling. Oh no. Oh, darn. We're going to start again. Love all of their videos. They're just absolutely stunning. And I wanted to just walk you through some of their accomplishments. Obviously, I mentioned that they're really interested in activating sort of this global movement, if you will, around marine conservation. They've also done work like securing over 449,000 square kilometers of land in South Georgia, or ocean in South Georgia, and the South Sandwich Islands, where they were able to get the highest protection status for them so that there's no fishing in that area. And they work through something called the Rebuilding Marine Life Recovery Framework, where they protect ocean and species. They help rehabilitate destroyed habitats. They work to fight pollution and promote and ensure sustainable fishing practices. And they believe that the sea and the ocean is a huge natural solution to climate change. So recasting the ocean is a solution for that. And finally, working to get equity and justice for coastal communities who are affected by climate change. The next example is Asher J. She is a very cool lady. She has an approach of many different mediums with her art, but she really likes to sort of evoke a visceral response to issues, including wildlife trafficking, poaching, and habitat loss. And so I'm going to show you a quick little animation that she did about rhino poaching. I feel like when I stop that, it's a very abrupt stop, sorry. So again, you can see that she really tries to elicit a very visceral emotional response to the issues that she's addressing. Her impact has really been engaging millions of people through campaigns, huge installations in places like Times Square. She works with organizations on campaigns and driving awareness around different issues such as World Wildlife Fund, the African Wildlife Foundation, the American Museum of Natural History, and National Geographic, just to name a few. But she's kind of just in the type of person who likes to drive awareness by putting things very much in your face about the reality of the situation. And so she has a very different approach, but it is very impactful. Another example I'd like to introduce is John Hyde, and John is really an independent photographer, and his work is through photographic documentation. He lives in, his work is in Alaska and the Pacific Northwest, and much of what he does is sort of bridge the gap between government and conservation. And so he has learned that biology, conservation and politics are highly intertwined and complicated. And so as a result, he has done a lot of work to try to work with both sides to come up with solutions for conservation that work for both sides. And I am going to scroll through some of his imagery here, but some of his accomplishments include with the Tongass National Forest, they had a management approach that was very consumptive with logging and mining, and he was able to really help transform that mindset to one that's more conservation and recreational in mind. He also does a lot of photography of wildlife and different species, and he loves all of them, but he is especially drawn to or has had a special encounter with a wolf called Romeo, who maybe you've heard of him, but he was a black wild orphaned wolf in Juneau, Alaska, and he kind of befriended the community. He befriended dogs, humans, and he was a lone wolf. And so he told his story through a photographic essay. And because of that, the story has sort of been revered worldwide, and he has been able to change a lot of mindsets about the importance of species like wolves, where they are really important parts of the ecosystem and need to be protected and conserved. He's also really been proud of the fact that a lot of his work has changed the most stuff through a photographic essay. And because of that, the story has sort of been revered worldwide, and he has been able to change a lot of mindsets about the importance of species like wolves, where they are really important parts of the ecosystem and need to be protected and conserved. He's also really been proud of the fact that a lot of his work has changed the most stubborn and skeptical mindsets around conservation, where conservation was not something they thought was important, to people now believing that conservation is something that they should care about, and even taking small steps to help the planet and go out and enjoy nature more than they would have otherwise. And now there's me. So my impact really started, for the most part, has been about engaging the next generation. I want to give you a little bit background, but before I do, I think David Attenborough said it best when he said, if children don't grow up knowing about nature and appreciating it, they are not going to understand it. And if they don't understand it, they're not going to protect it. And if they don't protect it, who will? And unfortunately, I think this is where we are. We are really needing a new generation of conservation-minded people. And so I started my career, as you heard from Steve, it's been very windy, when I was pregnant with my son. And my husband and I are both very passionate about wildlife, animals in general, and of course the environment. And so we wanted our son to grow up with that same value system. And so I created his nursery art with some species that we loved. And when he was born, I just was so taken with the fact that he loved the art and woke up every day smiling and full of joy and pointing at the animals. And it inspired me to want to do this with other children and create more artwork that other children could enjoy and potentially fall in love with wildlife as well. And so over time, I started painting more and more species. And what I quickly came to find was that every species had a challenge. It didn't matter if they were domesticated or otherwise. They could have been poached, they could have been trafficked, they could have been exploited, they could have had their habitat taken away from them, or they could have just been endangered because of climate change. And regardless of the species, I saw that there was a need for something to be done. And so I felt this huge responsibility to give back. And so from the very beginning, I decided I was going to give back to this specific issue. Oh boy, I'm forgetting what I have here. Okay, I'll just click it. What happened? I hit the power button. That's why. Okay, but beyond giving back, I also have been able to connect with other organizations and so forth, where I'm able to do work that's beyond giving back. And so in this case, Center for Biological Diversity used my artwork of different endangered species that they protect or work to protect on their major donor cards. I also let organizations use my art for fundraisers or for marketing. Another way I've worked is through working directly with an organization to create artwork that exemplifies the species that they're working with. So St. Francis Wolf Sanctuary out of Texas takes in wolves and wolf dogs who cannot be reintroduced into the wild. And they asked that I paint 4 of their most beloved species, or beloved wolf dogs, so that they could sell prints in their gift shop to raise money for the sanctuary. And I'm going to be honest, I had a boyfriend long distance for quite a while. I fell quite in love with Achilles here. So another way I like to get involved is through volunteerism. Stand for Animals clearly is a domesticated animal clinic, veterinary clinic, but what I love is that they use me in my role to help them come up with creative solutions to either engage the community or raise money. And some of the things that we've done that have been a lot of fun is art shows, so getting artists sort of like David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation, but on a very tiny scale in Charlotte, North Carolina. getting donations from artists so that we could raise money for the clinic. And also, for the last few years, we've had an annual dog talent show called So You Think You Can Bark. So that's been a lot of fun as well. Another way that I engage people and the next generation is through publications. My husband, who's also a Cornell grad, he and I wrote our first children's book called I Wish for You, and all of the art and the wording is about how we can learn our values that we hope our kids grow up with by observing wildlife. And we decided that we wanted this to be an educational tool right from the beginning, and so we provided back matter, which you can see here, that really discusses each species in more detail, and even we have a whole blurb about how biodiversity is very important and conservation also is important. And we hope to have our second book come out at the end of the year, and it will also be in the same vein. And as Steve mentioned, I most recently was brought in by Artists for Conservation as a member, and I work, what's great about Artists for Conservation is on their platform, they have the ability to pair artists with who are doing this kind of work with the people who are interested in that kind of art and who are interested in conservation and want to purchase from artists in conservation. And I can tell you personally, that people buy my art for their nurseries or otherwise because they know I give back. And so that is a very powerful way to help people get engaged about conservation. This piece was done for Owasso Lions, which is a conservation group out of Kenya, and I painted Nanai, which was a beloved matriarch lioness in that pride that they protected. They unfortunately lost her. So this was sort of a memorial painting, but we sold the original, and now you can go to Artists for Conservation and purchase prints of this as well. And then I also work with photographers like John Hyde. I've actually used his photography for some of my artwork, but in this case, this was from my own photograph, observing herons building their own nest for their little ones to be, I guess. And it was really just amazing to watch how human they were, where they were building nests, and the dad would go out and get a branch and bring it back to the mom, and she would place it, and he'd go back out. It was just very inspiring to watch, and it was about a half hour that I watched them for. And so in this case, when I do a piece that's not necessarily tied to an endangered species like the heron, I will specify that I want money to go to something like Center for Biological Diversity so that it's raising money for biodiversity or conservation as a whole. So what have my specific impacts been? I am really proud to say that as of 2023, I have been able to donate a total of about $100,000 to wildlife conservation just through my art sales. I also work to get into stores where they can use my art for raising money, like National Park Service, San Diego Zoo. And of course, through my sales, I'm able to get the message of conservation across. In every package, there is something about how their purchase has made a difference. And so I've had over 40,000 sales in over 30 countries. So that conservation word is getting out there. Also teaching the next generation, as I mentioned, we've sold over 25,000 books so far from the first children's book, and what that has enabled us to do is to then go out and go to schools and talk about not only the book, but wildlife conservation as well. So as you can see, these are all very different examples of how artists are using their work to transform conservation. And it doesn't really matter what kind of art it is, but the point is that we want to move the needle through emotional connection, and to do so, we can use art in many different ways. I thought to end and wrap up the session, it would be really great to talk about how you potentially can use art in conservation and help move the needle. So for educators, it's really a mindset of how can we collaborate. So getting artists to understand conservation, maybe taking data classes or data and science classes where they learn how to translate the scientific data into their art and then use that art to hopefully instill that emotional connection and then evoke or inspire action. From the science perspective, a lot of conservationists don't think of artists as a place to go for inspiration to either raise money or do any of their projects. But I think teaching scientists and conservationists how to communicate through art and how to leverage art to communicate to a broader audience is really helpful. And then for conservation opportunities for artists, having externships or artists in residence opportunities where artists can go into the field alongside conservationists and do documentation and painting, just like David Shepard did, is really a great opportunity. For scientists and conservationists, if you're interested in using art in some form or fashion, thinking about what your goal is really important. So do you want to drive awareness about what you do or challenge that you're facing or just inform people about the specific species that you're working with? And then how do you attach that to the human element? What is a story that you really want to tell? And then think about how art can play a role in that. Funding and staffing is a really big key to this. I can personally tell you when I've worked with conservation groups, they're small and scrappy, and it's hard for them to do much more than what they already do. So thinking about how much money it might take, or if there should be somebody on staff who is really good at connecting with artists and working with them and helping to run that project. And finally, choosing wisely. If you're going to work with an artist, you want to make sure that their missions and values are in alignment with yours so that it's a well-executed project. And if you're an artist, obviously you should talk to other artists who are doing this. And if you can connect with conservation groups that you really admire or respect, do so. And really let your passion drive your work. So if you are passionate about polar bears or lions, paint them, sculpt them, create music around them, whatever it is that you do, and let that passion drive your work. Also, it's really important to consider, if you're still a student, of maybe taking courses in conservation so that you can start to learn about the issues that conservationists deal with and how you can potentially play a part. And of course, you want to learn how to communicate about your unique skill set, because a lot of artists and a lot of conservationists do not think that they necessarily come together, but being able to communicate how you're going to add value is really important. And obviously create as much as you can, because that will help you move forward. And then finally, if you are just a person who loves wildlife, I can tell you that you should look for artists who are creating and doing work in conservation and giving back to those causes. Oh, wow. I'm just like hopping around there, sorry. And then, look for exhibits that focus on conservation work. There are a lot of them out there. You do not have to go to London to see them. And if you're in a financial situation, you might even consider connecting with an organization that you're passionate about and offering to fund a project that utilizes art. And of course, you want to share your interest with as many people as possible. Introduce friends and family to what you're passionate about so that they may too learn about the issues and have hopefully an open mind and a dialogue that can foster action. So there is a lot that I just talked about, so let's just do a quick recap. So we know that the way we've been communicating for the most part has not been the most effective in engaging a broader audience, and so we really need to try to be more effective in that. And to do so, we need to find a way to create an emotional connection to the issues and help people understand the value of conservation. Finally, of course, art has a unique power to do this because it is a much more effective approach in communicating the issues than science and data, and much more powerful. And then finally, anyone can be part of this movement in moving the needle. So with that, I would love to open it up to questions. And thank you.